Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Food Farm Talk. Today, both your hosts are here, myself, Emily Duncan, and Abdul-Rahim Abdulai. And we're super excited for this week's episode because yesterday, October 16th, 2019, was World Food Day. And so we've dedicated this show to talking about World Food Day and what it means.
Yeah, we are really excited to be back on the show again after a few weeks out. And we couldn't have been back on a better time than today, just after celebrating World Food Day yesterday. So it's great. Yeah, so maybe we should start with a bit of context and the history of actually what World Food Day is, because, today it seems like every day is a different kind of holiday or something special day. Yeah.
But World Food Day has actually been happening for a fairly long time.
Yeah, World Food Day actually started in 1945 when the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization started to observe the day, 16th of October every year as World Food Day. People have been observing it since 1945, and there's a great history around World Food Day because we use it to celebrate food and to talk about how to feed the world, and always it's about how do we get to a stage where we have a world of zero hunger as well.
Yeah, so it's been happening every year. And yeah, like you said, the Food and Agricultural Organization, we often just refer to it as the FAO.
Yeah, the FAO, yeah.
And it happens internationally. So it's this big organization that's organized it, but even smaller non-for-profits that are interested in issues of global food security, businesses dealing with food production, and of course, researchers like ourselves who are interested in talking about these issues in terms of policy and where we need to go in how to create a world with zero hunger.
Yeah, so one thing to also notice, like I mentioned, is something that is celebrated across the globe. So all the, 190 member states of the Food and Agriculture Organization actually observe this day. Though it's not a holy day, but it's still a day that people sit down to reflect about how they feed the world, about how they interact with food in various forms. So there's a lot of events happening all over the globe just to mark this day. And surely even in Canada here, we are not left out. There are a lot of events that are happening here in Canada. And surely what we have today is being dedicated to World Food Day as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, since it's been happening since 1945, we have to think about, it's a reminder kind of every year to think about what is the current status of global food security. And it's still a problem that we're facing. We know that about, I think the statistics around
820 million people are still chronically food insecure. So these are just people who on every day in the year continuously still go to bed hungry or still go to bed not knowing what they will eat the next morning, which is still, I say, sad situation in the world that we produce a lot of food right now. And it even becomes worse when you look at food security, which goes beyond just people going hungry. Even more, over 1 billion people today are malnourished, either because they don't have enough food nutrients in their system or in their diets, or either they are obese, they eat too much, or they not the right combination of food, which means that they have obesity in the world today. So it's kind of a situation where you look at it, there's a lot of people who are hungry. There's even a lot more people who suffer from diseases or illnesses related to food.
Yeah, so this kind of move towards zero hunger, I think that's kind of what we think about when we think about food security and those over 800 million people who are going to bed hungry. But we have to also recognize that food security is also about nutrition security and making sure that you're getting the right healthy diet, and that we have this flip side of the problem where so many people are suffering from diseases related to being overweight or obese.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at it from that perspective. So as we are talking about it, you look at the fact that people are hungry, but you look at the fact that some people, let's say, have more than enough to eat. So it goes back to issues of how do we distribute food through the system to make sure that those who don't have it right now will actually have it. We can't do that. We can't achieve that zero hunger if we don't look at how food is distributed as well.
Yeah, especially when we think about the fact that we actually produce currently enough food to feed everybody over 3,000 calories a day. Yeah. So it's not that people are going hungry because we don't have enough food. You're right. It just comes down to that distribution issue. Yeah. Which is why, so the basis of World Food Day is highlighting this second sustainable development goal. So I think there's 17 sustainable development goals.
Yeah, we have 17 sustainable development goals, and I think the second one is zero hunger. And since the coming into force of the sustainable development goals, every year most of what we talk about in World Food Day is to achieve this zero hunger. How do we get to that stage where everybody have enough of what they actually need to function as a human being in a very dignified way?
Yeah, and so I think some of the research that we're doing here at the University of Guelph on food and agriculture is so important to trying to address this problem. So Abdul, how would you say that your research, the work that you're doing for your PhD, relates to World Food Day?
Yes, that's kind of a very interesting question, I will say, because what I do in my PhD work centers around digital technologies in agriculture, and we are told that digital technologies are a game changer for agriculture because there's a lot of part of the problem in which that we find ourselves in agriculture is inefficiencies in how we produce, distribute, and even consume food. So with these digital technologies of different forms, be it just the use of mobile phones or be it the use of blockchain technologies to track food production, these technologies are anticipated that they will bring at least transparency and in terms of how food is moved from production to consumption. But also, apart from that, these technologies come with the generation of a lot of data. And we know that farming as an occupation depends so much on knowledge. So with the knowledge that is generated from this data, if we are able to make good use of the knowledge, we will be able to improve how we produce food to be able to feed the globe. So definitely that's one side of how my research actually relates to zero hunger. How do we get to that end? But then we also will look at the social aspect of it, on how will it actually affect communities, and how do we make sure that these technologies get into the system in a way that it still promotes like social fibers to make sure that communities stay together to be able to help themselves in areas that they actually need to produce food and consume food.
I think that's so important that, when we're talking about moving towards a world with zero hunger, that there's so many different factors that are feeding into that, especially, that new technologies, different things that are introduced to our food system, that we're doing that in a sustainable and equitable way, that ensures that rural communities are strong and vibrant and are able to continue to produce the food that we need.
Yeah. And I know we work also in area of digital technologies, where you deal more with data. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how this data could feed into zero hunger?
Yeah, I think there's a really strong connection there, especially because, World Food Day is put forth by FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and they're one of the major international organizations that's collecting a lot of information and a lot of data about world food production in order to create better policies at the international level, national levels, and even down to communities about like what interventions are going to be able to work best to move towards a world with zero hunger. And to do that, we need to understand all kinds of different factors that are influencing food production and influencing distribution of food. And where digital technologies come in is they're the things that are collecting this data, that we're having more precise predictions and in real time of what yields are, and better connections to markets so that, we're producing things that are needed in certain areas. And so all these kind of digital technologies, they're generating information that can help us contribute to less food waste, because we know globally almost a third of the food we produce is wasted.
So that's one of the big issues when we come to food insecurity in the world. So we can't get to that zero hunger if we continue to waste a third of the food that we produce.
Yeah, and so I think all the data that these technologies are generating are helping to forge just better connections throughout our food system so that we can make better decisions towards a world with zero hunger.
That's really good, and definitely apart from what we do, there are a lot of people out here who are doing marvelous and incredible work in different areas in order to promote food security or to move us towards zero hunger that we're actually trying to achieve. So we talked to a couple of people as well who tell us a little bit about the work they do and how it relates to World Food Day.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity to talk to some of the amazing researchers here at the university and ask them, how is the work you're doing contributing to this larger picture and this international celebration of food? So now we'd like to, turn it over to some clips and the highlights of the research that's being done here, contributing to moving our world towards zero hunger.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marie Gutgezel. I am a third-year PhD student in the Department of Integrative Biology here at the University of Guelph. And my research is particularly focused on trying to understand how different methods of food production influence the structure and functioning of adjacent ecosystems.
Thanks for being on the show today. So we're talking about World Food Day. And so how can you make the connection between, what's going on with ecosystems and the environment with the goal of World Food Day, which is about raising awareness about the issue of global hunger?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we know is that in the coming years, we really have to increase our food production in order to sustain our increasing global population. But in order to do that, that means we actually need to find a way to either make our food production more be able to produce more on a smaller amount of land, or actually be able to use more land to produce more food. And one of the things we're realizing is how much when we modify our landscapes for this food production, that we're influencing not only the ecosystems where we're actually producing that food, but that the ecosystems adjacent to these. So, for example, if you imagine a farm with a stream running through it, that stream is actually very important for the functioning of that entire ecosystem and actually relates to the functioning of the field. And so I'm trying to understand how food production might influence these adjacent ecosystems, and how that, as we modify more landscapes and things like that, how that might influence and continue to influence these adjacent ecosystems.
That sounds really interesting. And that, sometimes when we think about food security and hunger, we're thinking about food that's available, but it sounds like your research is really about the production aspect and this connection to the land that we're growing food on.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's trying to understand how can we make the actual production of our food more sustainable, not just in the short term, but also the long term.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for giving us the highlights of your research, and happy World Food Day.
Thank you very much. Happy World Food Day.
Hi, my name is Carling Beeg. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Guelph, and I'm really interested in the feedbacks between food production and ecosystem function, and how that can relate to food security.
Well, thanks so much for being here and talking about your research today. As we know, it's World Food Day, and we're thinking about issues of global food security and how to get us to a place where we have zero hunger. And lots of research at the University of Guelph is focusing on this. And so how would you describe how your research ties into that theme of World Food Day?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in food security in the future. So there's a lot of different methods of food production. That could be agriculture, that could be fisheries. And I'm interested in how things like human behaviors can alter environmental impacts that could potentially impact food security in the future, and things like fisheries, small-scale fisheries in particular, but also, downstream aquatic ecosystems that are impacted by agricultural land development.
That sounds awesome. So you're focusing on fisheries and the food we get from there. What about like the kind of traditional ecosystems we think about, like crops and field production?
Yeah, so I don't particularly focus on the crops themselves, but they're obviously a huge part of food production. Well, one of the biggest parts of food production. And so we clearly need to be increasing our food production in order to feed a growing human population, but if we do it in sustainable ways, we can ensure that through preserving ecosystem services, those food production systems will maintain resilience in the future under climate change and increased sort of stress on the systems, but also everything is connected, so it's looking downstream from, say, that crop production where there also may be a commercial fishery and a lake downstream. And so it's preserving both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's super important, that when we're thinking about food security, we're thinking about all these different interconnections, that how things, ecosystems in one place feed into ecosystems in another, where we're maybe producing different types of food. And it sounds like your research is really forward-looking of, we don't need to be... We're looking at long-term food security, not just what's happening now, but towards the future, that we have this growing population and will we be able to sustain them?
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on our show today on World Food Day, and happy World Food Day.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.
Hi, my name is Sarah Marquis, and I'm a second-year master's student here at the University of Guelph. I'm studying in the Geography, Environment, and Geomatics department, and my work focuses on digital agriculture technologies and how they are impacting farmers and the food system. I'm particularly interested in how digital technologies generate agricultural data, and I look at how this data is being governed, who has access to that data, and who has ownership of it.
Thanks, Sarah, for being on Food Farm Talk today. Today we're celebrating World Food Day, which is trying to get us thinking about how we're tackling the problem of global hunger. And so your research on digital agricultural technologies sounds really cool. How does it relate to this issue that we're thinking about on World Food Day?
So we know that these technologies are really helpful for productivity, and they also have incredible potential to enable sustainable agriculture. They could contribute to improving global food security if both large and small scale farms are empowered by these technologies. There are, however, some challenges.
So what are the challenges associated with digital agricultural technologies?
Well, I think it's really important for farmers to be able to maintain control over the data that they generate on their farms through these technologies. And we really want farmers to benefit from this tech revolution as much as large agribusinesses are benefiting. And we also want small-scale farmers to benefit as much as large-scale farmers, because we think that an equitable food system can and will enable global food security.
It sounds like your research on digital agricultural technologies is really important to moving towards a more food secure world. So thanks for giving us the highlights, and happy World Food Day.
Thank you so much.
That was so great to hear about the exciting research that's going on and how it connects to World Food Day. So every year, World Food Day has a theme to it. And last year's theme in 2018, the theme was called our actions are our future, which I think is a really important message.
Yeah, it's a really important message which ties into what we do today actually have greater influence on what happens tomorrow. So if we want to have zero hunger tomorrow, we need to start to act now.
Yeah, and it really makes me think about, the message that Carly was saying about her research about, it's not just about having food security now. It's about, the next generation and in the future that we want to be able to sustain our planet for a long time, but at the same time be able to feed more people in the future. Yeah. And so this year's theme is a bit of a pivot from that. And a lot of the researchers that we talked to on today's episode were focusing on the issue of agricultural production. But this year's theme, Abdul, what's this year's theme?
I think this year's theme is actually focusing on nutrition more broadly. So it's about a recipe for healthy life.
Yeah, and it's healthy diets for zero hunger,
Zero
right?
hunger, yeah.
So it's more focusing on kind of the food aspect of the food and agricultural
so it's going
organization.
beyond just the production. And we've mentioned earlier that one of the biggest issues is not really about how much we produce, because we are already producing more than we actually need right now, but it's about what happens after the production. So this year's theme is actually zeroing down to the lower level, where how we turn the produce food into nutritious food, nutrition in our bodies as well. Yeah,
and I think that's super important. And there is lots of research that's happening kind of on the nutrition side of that. A study that came out of the University of Guelph just earlier this year was kind of looking at global food production and realizing that we really produce a lot of grains and cereals, but if everybody on the planet were to eat a healthy, balanced diet, we don't actually produce enough fruits and vegetables for everybody.
Yeah, that was a staggering finding, because as we say that we produce a lot more food, but when we try to now look at the nutritional aspect of what we produce in terms of the diversity of food production, you realize that we are not really doing enough in terms of producing what the human body actually needs to function.
And when we think about the people who are most at risk for malnutrition, that over 800 million who are going to bed hungry, the foods that are most likely most accessible to them are those cereals and grains, maize and corn and wheat, like those kinds of things. Yeah. And while those are an important part of a diet, you also need proteins
vegetables and
micronutrients, so which may be out of reach for people who are living in poverty. So I think that's an important piece to keep in mind on World Food Day too. It's not just about producing more, but it's also what are we actually producing.
Yeah, that's a very important message, and to tie it into the nutrition, it's important that the choices we make, even when we go to a grocery store, the choices we make are very important in the nutrition in our household. So in terms of what we eat, we need to be able to diversify our food sources, and we need to be able to eat more sustainable foods as well, which is very important, and trying to keep out food waste, which is a key part or contributor to the issue today.
Yeah, so I think the FAO was spot on in choosing this theme of healthy diets.
Yeah, it's very timely. To me, I really feel like it's important that as we talk about production, the nutrition aspect should be given due consideration, and there's no better time to do that than to actually use it as part of the theme for this year's World Food Day. So we need more action in terms of nutrition.
Yeah. And so if you're interested in kind of thinking more about World Food Day, we'll be posting on social media on Twitter about it, and you can really follow it with the hashtag World Food Day or hashtag Zero Hunger. And yeah, people are all over the globe kind of talking about this issue, and it's nice to have a day that kind of brings all these things related to food and agriculture to light for people to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's really important. And as you mentioned, if you want to talk about it, you can follow us on social media or write anything and hashtag Zero Hunger World Food Day, because it's important. Because if we are not able to communicate or to talk about these issues, people will sometimes not even have the information to be able to make these healthy choices or to be able to access the food they need. So it's important that we keep talking about it. We need to keep it in the communication circles as well. So it's very key.
Would you say that that's our call to action on World Food Day, is to keep talking about these issues and keep this conversation and this research going?
I will absolutely go for that. I believe that we need to continue to talk about it. These are the only ways we can actually bring some of these issues into the policy circles, because once we talk about it and you try to make more people aware of it, people will be able to act on some of these issues, be able to bring the desired change we actually want.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on in thinking about today's episode, focusing on World Food Day. And yeah, it happens every year on October 16th.
Yeah, so if you are if you are a human being, you will eat, and for that matter, you should always care about the food. You should not just even thinking beyond yourself. You should look at your neighbors and look at your community. Do as much as you can to actually contribute to that zero hunger or healthy living within your community in any capacity that you can do that.
I think that's a great message. And so thanks again so much to our listeners for listening to this week's episode of Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM here in Guelph. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Food Farm Talk. See you next week for another exciting edition.